Alrighty. Well, I wanted to thank Eric for inviting me. This is very exciting. I'm glad to be here to do this webinar. We are going to be looking at diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment and get some information on how they're used and when you should use them. They all have different purposes. So let me see here. Whoops. Hang on. Okay. So just to review our goals for today, we're going to first review some important fundamentals of student assessment. We're going to explore the differences between diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment and what each one is best suited for. And we're also going to use a template to identify resources for creating a complete assessment plan. You should have received a template or a table from Eric either yesterday or earlier today, and I'm hoping everyone got that. Just checking to see if everyone has that.
Yeah, raise your hand if you got that form that Marie's going to kind of walk you through. Okay.
Okay.
Looks like just about everybody, maybe two-thirds of the people or so.
That's cool. And if you still need one, we can get that to you, I think, somehow. Can we possibly send anyone that needs one, Eric?
Not in the midst of the webinar, but
okay, that's fine.
Completed one.
That's fine. But you, I'll show you it, and you'll be able to get one afterwards. Okay. So just a quick overview. Each type serves different purposes and different audiences. But all three types of assessment are really important to use together. You have to combine them to get a really clear snapshot of a person's skills and abilities. Using just one or the other, or even just two, you're not going to get a complete picture. So, diagnostic assessment reveals a learner's initial strengths and needs. So you can think of that as where to start. Formative assessment provides an ongoing look at a student's progress, and I like to call that how to proceed. And then summative assessment provides an evaluation or a culmination of a student's effort and performance once a program of study has completed, and that you can consider what to conclude. Does anybody have any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Is so far so good?
Right, and just to remind folks, if you want to chime in, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, and then, or you can also use that question feature to ask me to unmute you. So far so good with these three basic types of assessments.
Okay, cool. Okay, so if you have that assessment types worksheet, why don't you take it out now and hang on, because I want to show it to you. I just want to quickly review what's on it, and while we're going along through the webinar, I'd like you to fill it out. You can either fill it out on the screen or if you have it in front of you, and we'll be going over the different types of assessment, and you can record what you use in your program or in your classroom as we go. So hang on a second. I just want to show it to you. I got to exit here for 1 sec. And excuse me. Okay. Can you see it? I know that the text is small, but you should also have it. And I'll read it to you what I have. So in the top, the first column, you've got your intake and or your placement tests. Those are your diagnostic assessments. This middle column, your classroom assessments or formative assessments. And the last column, you've got tests for reporting or summative assessments. So reporting to funders, reporting to other stakeholders, things of that nature. So as we go along, just fill out in here all of the different assessments that you use in each column. And then we'll take a look at it each time, but then at the end we'll see what you have and see if there are holes in your assessment system. Okay? Sound good?
And if you don't have the form itself, you can just use a scrap piece of paper, I think, and make those 3 columns.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, you've got your intake or diagnostic, your classroom or formative, and your test for reporting or summative. Okay. All right, going back to this and switching. Okay. Okay, cool. Well, the first one we're going to look at is summative assessment. So in summative assessment, that provides an evaluation, as we saw, or a culmination of the student's effort and performance once a program of study has completed. So what to conclude? So let's just look at a few examples here quickly. Okay, so the different forms that it could come in, the end of chapter or unit tests, for example, end of school year projects, and then also your high stakes tests like the SAT, a GED, the MCAS, which is the Massachusetts high school exam, for example. And here's some characteristics that are classic of a summative assessment. They tend to be administered one at a time to a large group, and they're usually standardized, particularly in the case of high stakes tests. Okay, so now everyone has to get at the ready because we are going to have a pop quiz. So,
you want me to launch
yeah,
that one right now?
Oh, hold on one sec.
Okay.
I just want to review a couple things.
Okay.
So this particular little quiz that I've put together, it's a selected response quiz. That is what, or a multiple choice quiz. So the term for it is selected response, but multiple choice. It's not a constructed response quiz. A constructed response is one that you have to fill in the blank or come up with your own answer for. So here we go. Here's our multiple choice pop quiz.
All right.
Okay, Eric, ready.
It looks like it got cut off.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So let me see. Let me see if I can recreate it really quick. So keep speaking and I'll see if I can recreate it real quick.
Okay, I also have it in the old form on this, on my, gosh, this thing I'm put together here. So
that might be the easiest way.
Yeah, we can just go right ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess everybody can just raise their hand when you think we'll come to the right answer, and I'll go through the answers first for you, otherwise that's not fair. Okay, so here we go. Complete this. Standardized tests are A, are only useful if unders. A is only useful if unders. B, an attempt to level the playing field. B is an attempt to level the playing field. Or C, they provide all the information needed to effectively evaluate a student's performance. So C is provide all the information needed to effectively evaluate a student's performance. Okay, can you remember those three? Do you think you could raise your hand for them?
So why don't we, so why don't we say, go back to A.
Okay.
So does anybody want to speak to A? So if you think A, why don't you raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can speak to that if you think A is the answer. A going once. A going twice. Nobody for A. Okay.
All righty. Okay. Carrying on to B. Are an attempt to level the playing field. Any takers for B?
Anybody want to speak to B? Okay. Gordon, your hand's up first, so I'm going to unmute Gordon. So Gordon, you there? Hi, Gordon, are you there? Oh, no audio from Gordon. Gordon, do you have your microphone on? Nope. All right. Anybody else want to speak to it? I can unmute you and you can give your thinking behind picking B, that they're an attempt to level the playing field.
Can Gordon write what he thinks down?
Yeah, maybe Gordon, if your microphone doesn't work, can you use the question area to type in a...
Like, why did you choose B?
Oh, he doesn't have a mic. E just seems the best of the three. Okay. All right. Thanks,
All
Gordon. I know
right.
you don't have a mic now. Okay. Anybody else want to speak to B? Okay. So we have nobody for A. We have one person for B.
Okay, moving on to C. Provide all the information needed to effectively evaluate a student's performance.
Okay, Susie, do you want to speak to that? You got your answer in C via the question thing pretty quick. Do you want to speak to it? Oops, Susie, do you not have a microphone either? Nope. Okay. Peg, I saw your hand up. Do you want to? Peg, do you have your microphone on? Hi, Peg. Oop. Peg, you do not have your microphone either? Oop, a lot of people without microphone. Okay, Peg has no microphone, but she's going to type.
Cool.
All right, this is doing what we can with the technology that we have.
That's fine. We're
Oh,
we're
yeah.
we're managing.
Oh, Barbara's hands up. Barbara, you have a microphone? Nope. Okay. All right. So if you're in Peg's situation or Gordon's situation where you don't have a microphone, you could type in your answer here too, and I can read the answer to Murray. Okay. Looks like we're getting some. So Peg says they give all the info to be able to know areas of a student's strength gained and areas of needed instruction or improvement. Also, this is like being an old-fashioned working at a telegraph station.
Yeah.
I can see things coming across the ticker tape. She says the test can also measure effective teaching techniques too.
Okay,
Right?
actually that's really interesting. I kind of wish that you did have audio because it won't be so cumbersome for you. But
Okay.
um, I'd I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about how it helps your teaching. But maybe someone
Okay.
else has written too. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Anybody else want to type in? No? Okay. All right. Why don't you go forward then, Marie?
Okay, so I'm gonna go back and then explain a little bit. So nobody chose our only useful defenders, which I assume. So yes, that's correct. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can use um, the results of standardized tests in the classroom for the program and so forth. And I think that's, and I apologize for not remembering everyone's name, but I think that might have been what the person who was typing, and I said, oh, I'd love to hear what you have to say about how it helps teachers, because I
That was
know that,
Peg. Yeah.
yeah, Peg, yes, because yeah, you can use the results in a lot of different ways. So that one wasn't it. Okay, so B are an attempt to level the playing field. Maybe that was a little tricky on my part, but in fact, this is the correct answer. And I'll go back in one sec. Provide all the information needed to effectively evaluate a student's performance. Well, remember in the beginning of the slides, in fact, I'll just go right back. Where is it? Here. The second bulleted point, you really do need all three types of assessment, diagnostic, formative, and summative, um, combined to get an entire picture of a learner's skills and abilities. So this one, oops, sorry. So provide all the information needed. That one's also actually not correct. Okay, so what do I mean by an attempt to level the playing field? Well, just really briefly, the reason why standardized tests are developed is to try to take out anything that is unfair or biased within them. And that is a very difficult process. So for example, that's why standardized tests have a very particular number of test items and usually two forms of the test, and actually they are discarded and new ones are created over a certain number of years for most standardized tests. They're also timed, as you know. They have very strict rules for administering them. So there's a whole process and a whole process for developing the test, as well as a whole process for administering the test. So, and the whole point of that is to try to eliminate anything that's going to be unfair to any one person. Now, I have to say, I've taken some courses in psychometrics, and it is very informative and helpful, but it is also very tricky, and regardless, you're a human who's making these tests. So a lot of people would, tend to disagree that they completely level the playing field, but it is the attempt that they try to make. So there's a long-winded explanation about that quiz. Does anyone have comments on that or questions?
Again, it looks like many people don't have microphones, so I think that, you can try to raise your hand if you do have a microphone, or if not, you can use the question feature to chat
Okay.
in.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be sending you a bibliography of some resources after the webinar is over. And in fact, there's a great article from out of Nixal, which is no longer operating, but a great article that talks about leveling the playing field in adult basic education. And it doesn't just talk about testing, it talks about a whole variety of ways that the adult education system kind of needs to be more fairly treated and fairly focused and set up. So I'll send that to you. Okay. So I'll do this really quickly. This is a little bit of more information out to you. Just the importance of large-scale tests. Here's, you can compare amongst very large groups. As you already know, we've talked about that. To prove ability and competence, such as these examples that you have here. And then for us in adult education, we particularly use them for marking student achievement, providing credentials to students. They are integral to the framework of our national system. As you know, a lot of funding comes from the federal government, and that is tied to the requirements of the NRS, the National Reporting System. And of course, they're tied to program funding. No matter who your funder is, they're going to be asking you for some sort of accountability, and often it is a large-scale test. Okay, so briefly, I keep saying briefly. I don't know why I feel like I need to say that. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to take a look at norm and criterion reference tests, the two main kinds of standardized tests that we have. So the common ones in adult education are the TABE, which is a norm reference test, CASAS, which is a criterion reference test. The Best Plus or Best Literacy is a criterion reference test. And the GED, the new GED that's going to come out in 2014, is a norm referenced and a cut score descriptor test. So let me just explain. Norm referenced refers to tests in which the group that the one group is being compared against another. So, all the people who take the TABE are basically being compared against each other when the results come from their test taking. In CASAS, you have a whole set of criteria that you are working towards. So you're not competing or working against your classmates in terms of understanding where you are in your learning process. You're just trying to reach a particular goal in that kind of testing. Best Plus and Best Literacy are also criterion reference testing. They are asking you to reach a goal. The old GED used to be only norm referenced, but now with the new GED will also be norm referenced, but in addition, it's going to be aligned with the Common Core standards that are being used across the nation in K-12. And if you are not familiar with those, I also have some information about those in the bibliography for you. So the cut score descriptors are going to be, they're basically like levels. And they're going to use the Common Core standards, and they're going to um, kind of use them as a criteria for GED testing when the new one comes out in 2014. Okay, so here's another little response quiz that we have for you. It's a selected response quiz, and we'll do the same thing. People can raise their hands. Um, so, this is also a norm referenced. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, it's a selected response quiz, so you are going to choose between two things that I've put up on the next frame, and it's norm referenced. So in other words, I created this little test using people and what their responses were. So you have to answer this question: which is better? Go to that screen. Okay, you have two choices. You can choose A, savory foods, or you can choose B, sweet foods. So how many people choose A?
Right. So raise your hand for savory foods or type it in. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, we have some last minute voting. So savory going once. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 for savory.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Or how many for
put people's
sweet?
hands down. Oh, hang on. There's a light breaking
Oh,
vote
oh.
for savory. The polls are still open. All right. So we have 6. I'm gonna clear those. So we have 6 for savory. How many for sweet? 1. Sweet going once. Sweet going twice. All right, 1 for sweet. Carol, you're the only person that raised your hand for sweet.
Oh, Carol's got the sweet tooth.
Okay.
All right. So obviously no one wins this prize or gets the better grade. But so I just wanted to explain to you. So here's the norm groups that I used. So there's me and my son Paolo, and we both prefer savory foods. And then that's my husband Andre and our daughter Edie, and they both prefer sweet foods. So in fact, this is a very invalid test because there's only 4 um, people against which to make my norm groups, and they happen to not side 3 and 1. They just went 2 and 2. But the point is to show you just how to just how a norm group goes. And if this had been a criterion referenced kind of test, in other words, the criteria would have been your goal to like the savory food or to instead like the sweet foods, then I think we might have ended up in a foodie fight. So
Okay.
anyway, just a little chuckle there.
Okay. So maybe we can stop here for a second to think about this a little bit more. So if people are really comfortable with the idea of a normed reference test, right? That, as Marie said, one of the ideas of a normed reference test is you're comparing groups of people against each other or where you would fit. So the whole idea of a norm reference test is that there's going to be some sort of distribution of scores or some sort of distribution of skills or outcomes within a given population. And then once you figure out what you think that distribution is going to be, then you can place people kind of on that distribution, right? Which is,
Right.
if you think about, Lake Wobegon from the NPR show, right? One of his running jokes is that Lake Wobegon, where everybody is above average, right? So, no, you can't have everybody above average, right? That's
Right.
the idea. That's the idea of a distribution. Um,
Right.
and in some ways, and this is kind of the hidden secret of normed reference tests, is that normed reference tests measure success, but they also, by definition, have to create failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to craft you have to craft assessments in such a way that half the people are going to get above the medium score and half people are going to get above it. So
Mhm.
it's really a question of comparing distribution. And so when Marie was asking us ask about savory and sweet, then you can think about where people are falling out versus expectations versus the criterion where it's a set of skills that you're going towards. So as she was saying, if it had been savory or sweet as the expected outcome, those of you that thought that sweet should be the expected outcome would disagree if savory was the thing that we were being measured on as the only way to
Right.
measure our taste buds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, oops, I think there's a question here. So, oh, okay, yep. Okay, so sorry, just keep going, Marie.
Okay. Okay. So actually, let's take a moment now and look at that table. Let me just exit and I'll pull it up here. Okay. So we were just talking about the last column of assessments, tests for reporting, summative assessments. Okay. I'd love to hear what some of the summative assessments that you guys use in your program or your classroom are. Can people like type in there, or if you are able to use audio, or I don't know how you want to organize that, Eric, but I'd love to hear what anyone has started to fill out here.
Okay, right. So let me see if Carol has a. Okay, Hespa. Carol, do you have a microphone? Can I unmute you? Carol, do you have a microphone? Okay, Hespa, which is a New Jersey test. Casas. Okay, no, Carol doesn't have one. Okay, so HESPA, which is the high stakes test, and CASAS. Okay,
Okay. Actually, I'm not familiar with HESPA. Is it the
it's
high
a New
stakes
Jersey
test
one.
for high
Yeah,
school?
yeah, it's a New Jersey one.
Okay.
Okay. Other summative assessments that people using in reporting? Peg says the TABE, the GED,
Yep.
the Best Plus, and the Best Literacy. And then she asked, do the official practice GED tests get included here too?
Um, yes, they are summative assessments. Yes,
Okay.
but they would need to be used for different purposes, right? That's any practice test is sort of is less control. What happens with those is the difference is they're less controlled than the official test. So you have to, they're constructed the exact same way, and you have to administer them under the same conditions as you would the official test, but the practice tests are under less control. So in other words, they can get out there into the public a lot more easily than the official tests. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Okay. Darnell mentions the TABE and the best. Gordon mentions the TABE, and I think Gordon also does use the practice GED. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And has anybody there's a couple of new assessments that are I've been reading about. I don't know if anybody's been using anything sort of out of the mainstream for reporting.
All right. So anything in addition to what we've just mentioned?
Yeah, does anybody use, I mean, this happens. Some funders ask for portfolios or more cumulative type things for reporting. Does anybody use anything like that? Okay.
Oh, maybe not. Nope.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll revisit this again after we look at diagnostic. And let me just go back to screens. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at diagnostic and formative assessment. Um, and there are similarities to both of these, and then there are differences. But the most important thing for both of these types of assessment is they both provide ongoing information to the teacher and the student on the teaching and learning process. So you continually get feedback when you're using diagnostic and formative assessments, as opposed to a lot of summative assessments where you need to wait to get the results back in order to use that information for something, either in your program or classroom. And then this is, I said this actually somewhere in my travels. I said that good assessment is good teaching, and I do think of it that way, that if you are appropriately using assessment, then you are also going to be engaging in really good teaching. And then I thought the word good is sort of too innocuous, so I used it this way the other day in a post on the internet, that I think appropriate assessment equals effective teaching. I'll say it again just because it's not written down, and I apologize for that. But appropriate assessment equals effective teaching. And actually, I would, if anybody has an immediate reaction on that, I would love to hear your feedback. But it seems to me that if you are doing these kinds of things, keeping in mind who the students are and what their goals are, and that they should be involved in this process of both teaching, or I'm sorry, learning, and then assessing their learning and helping you assess their learning, then that's got to be some pretty good teaching, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think Marie, that's a good idea. Why don't we take a minute so people can use the question feature to sort of think about and then maybe put down into some words what role assessment plays in your own teaching practice, over and above summative assessments. So when you're thinking
Great.
about ongoing assessments, what part of your teaching life deals with formative and diagnostic assessments? Maybe take a
Sure.
minute to kind of put some ideas down in the question area, and I'll read out some as they start to come out.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'm just going to refill my water glass. Back in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. So Carol has already said that it allows the teacher to check periodically how the student is doing in the class.
Nice. Yep, absolutely.
And then Meg says that she uses unit tests to make sure the students are understanding and learning. So Meg, do you
Definitely.
mean the end of unit tests or sort of as you're going through tests within a unit to see that students are kind of on track? Okay, other folks chime in. Okay, so Meg is saying end of unit tests. Okay. I think those would typically fall more under the summative, right, Marie? Like an end of
Yeah,
unit test.
they would technically, but luckily their unit tests are written very tightly to the material you've got in that particular unit, because they're not usually giant units, right?
Mhm.
So you can definitely get some other information from them.
Okay.
It is
Gordon
good
said,
to it,
okay,
it
sorry.
is good to do things um, throughout your units, no matter how short or long they are, to be checking. And I guarantee that you do, because we're going to look at different kinds of classroom assessment in a little bit, and you will recognize a lot of the activities that I'm going to show you.
Okay. Gordon says the TABE does pinpoint fairly specific competencies, for example, division, fractions, percents, etc., and helps us determine a student's strengths and areas for improvement.
Great.
Thanks
Yep.
for, thanks for sharing that, Gordon. Okay, maybe one or two others, and then we'll move on in the interest of time.
Yep.
Darnell says that formative assessment enables a tutor or teacher to determine the level of understanding and what might need to be taught. Indeed.
Nice.
Okay, I think Mary, why don't you keep going, and other folks you can keep typing, and you can send those in, and then we can call them up later if we need to.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to look at diagnostic assessment first, and just as a reminder from one of our first slides, diagnostic assessment reveals a learner's initial strengths and needs or where to start. Now here's a whole bunch of different types of diagnostic assessment, and I'm sure, as I mentioned, that you will recognize some of these and use some of these in your classroom. So learner questionnaires, and I have a great, I have resources for you that maybe we won't look at because we'll see. I have like 17 minutes or something left. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. So, but I have a bunch of great resources for you that provides you with examples of some of these things. Learner questionnaires is one of them. Reading passages out loud, looking at writing samples, doing oral interviews, giving pre-tests, locator tests. One example that is a really good diagnostic is the DAR and the DARTS, which was originally developed for children but then adapted for adults, and it's an excellent reading assessment, and I have a reference to it in there for you. Is anyone familiar with DAR?
Okay, raise your hand if you're familiar with DAR.
If you use it. Okay.
No? Okay. Well, and to kind of follow up, Mary, that we're coming up on the hour. I think we can go a little bit past, but then I think
Okay.
I think we will be able to send out the resources to folks. So as long as they kind of know what to look for and kind of how to make sense of what they get, then that will be
Okay.
good too.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Oops,
Then
and there was
moving
just,
along.
sorry, there was just a quick question from Robert too about sharing the presentation via email or a website. I think we will be able to make the PowerPoint available. We can send that
Mhm.
out as a PDF, and I'm hoping to be able to archive this and to be able to have a recording of it available through Angel's website.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. I'll make sure you get everything that you need to help you, because this is short. It's very quick, but I'm giving you a lot, so you'll have a lot to sift through and digest. Okay. Okay, so here's some typical characteristics of your diagnostic assessment. They're often teacher-made. Um, they're not necessarily formally standardized, and they may take the form of regular activities incorporated right into your lessons. So I just scooted back one frame, and so some of these you may in fact develop and then administer yourself in your classroom. So that's a very typical thing to do with diagnostic assessments. Another example that I have for you that I think I will stop and show you really quickly is a website called Assessment Strategies and Reading Profiles. Short is ASRP. And I'm going to do this quick because Eric's right. I should show you so you're a little bit oriented to what you're looking at. Okay, find my thing here. Okay. Dragging her over here.
Here we go.
Alrighty. Okay, so you might not be able to see this super great because it's small, but maybe you can. Everybody see links, assessment strategies, and reading profiles? I'm pretty sure you can because we were
Yep,
just
I
looking
think
at my
people should
other.
be able
Okay,
to. Yep, people can.
so this this is a huge website, and it's all focused on reading. But there's a lot of these diagnostic assessments that they give you other information too. There's also a bunch of different tests on how to conduct an oral interview and interview students, and there's throughout all the pages that do have assessments, they have a video that you can click on and watch that demonstrates the administration of that particular test. So it's very cool. I encourage you at some point just to click around on it to see what is there. But again, it's a big test. So, I'm sorry, it's a big website. So just you take your time. Here's just one example of the diagnostic testing video. Um, you can click on these and then see how this is administered. So it's pretty cool. But I wanted to show you one thing at this site. If you scroll down here, there's a whole bunch of areas that you can learn about assessments. It's very informative and very well set up. If you click on free tests and resources, you get a whole stack of reading diagnostics here. And I'm not going to spend time clicking on each one. Of course, we don't have time, but come here and look at these things and see what you think of them. They're very easy to administer, and they're very, very helpful. They yield a lot of good results. So I encourage you to come and check this out, especially if you are doing a lot of stuff with reading. Okay.
I think a website such as that is also a really good opportunity for professional development at your program level. If a couple of teachers or tutors working at the same site would go and, collect different assessments and be able to share and talk to each other about what they're trying out, I think that's really important too.
Absolutely. That is exactly the way it should be done, I think. I think that's a great suggestion. To do it with a peer review or in a small group, and take pieces of it and check it out together and use it together and work with each other. It's a way to work with that site. It's very rich, so there's a lot to take in. Okay, so now we're going to just take a look at formative assessment and reminding you that formative assessment provides an ongoing look at a student's progress or how to proceed. And again, diagnostic and formative assessment have a lot in common. Pardon me. Um, it's pretty broad-reaching. Any type of learning activity that yields useful information to the teacher and the students on a student's progress is considered formative assessment. So that leaves it wide open. Some characteristics: it's similar to diagnostic assessments. It's often incorporated right into activities and lessons. Often it's deliberate, but often it's not. I'm sure all of us, have the experience of just simply observing your classroom and seeing some interaction go on and realize, a need or a success, or, get some insight into what's going on in the classroom just by observing. So here's some examples of formative assessment that are pretty common. You've got peer evaluation, which is really, really powerful, and self-assessment too. Both of those are very, very powerful kinds of assessment because the student is involved. The student drives a lot of what's going on, or drives all of what's going on in some cases. Portfolios, building rubrics, rubric is a way to measure particular writing, especially writing, but I've seen them used in math very often. They use rubrics to measure GED essays and so forth. Pairing students of different levels so that they can become sort of a teaching learning pair. And then mentoring and coaching with students or non-students who have a much higher level of language or reading or whatever they're studying. So let's just briefly take a couple seconds. I want to show you some really cool examples, and I will send you this in the resources. This is from a colleague, David Rosen, who did a research project a couple of years back with a colleague of his in Belgium. And I hope everybody can see this okay. It's a longer paper, and I'm sending you the link so you'll have it. But here are some of the examples of formative assessment that they looked at in adult learner classrooms in Belgium. So people kept personal informal feedback on individual task-based assessments, which it's interesting how they discuss that in the article. They describe that more fully, but it's really cool. Um, Learner dialogues, which were based on writing, peer learning, a teacher log, which many of us keep, which is kind of a diary on what's going on in your classroom and what's happening with particular students. Regular learner progress communication, and that could have been with or between any one of these different folks in those roles there. Learner, teacher, counselor, vocational skills trainer, anybody that was in contact with the student. Progress marking, which they actually would use a rating process to do that. Exercises like oral presentations, group work, written exercises, criteria lists that they would develop for rating progress, various performance assessments. They would hold evaluative discussions in class, and then they often involve learners in setting the criteria for the evaluation. So learners were very involved in these particular places that they looked in Belgium. Any did any people do any of these kinds of things regularly in your classroom? Um, are there things that look really interesting to you that you might want to try? I just want to check in on that briefly, see what
Yeah,
you
there are
think about.
comments that people want to make about this, about either the success of these particular formative assessments or other formative assessments that you use yourself. And as you're typing, I think I'd want to emphasize that I think if you look at this list that David generated, most of these things don't feel like assessment.
Right.
There, as Marie was saying, that formative assessment at its best, I think, is built into the particular projects or topics that you're working on, and it just feels organic to what it is that you're doing. So
That's right.
the students don't feel like it's an additional test being put on them, and it's blends really well into what it is that you're already doing. So, for example, with the writing exercises, I mean, one of the things that I hear teachers say that they really like to do is, like, some people call it a free write time capsule. So if you use free writing and the students can, write about a topic in class and then you collect it, and then you ask them to free write again later, a couple weeks later, did you collect that? And you ask them to free write a couple weeks later, and then you can ask them to collect that. And then at the end of the semester, you can give them back all of the copies of their free write that they had produced, and then ask them themselves to analyze what they see as the progress between sample one, sample two, and sample three. As you're going along, you as the teacher get the information about where they are in terms of their writing development and what you need to work on. But each one of those free writes is on a topic that you're talking about already in the class.
Mhm. That's really cool.
Yeah, so that, I mean, and then all the other things that are listed there too, like oral presentations and group work. These are all things that you're doing. So formal assessment doesn't have to feel like an additional thing. It's just part of what you're doing in designing a lesson plan.
Yeah, and that's right, Eric. And in fact, good assessment and even if you want to call it testing, it, it's not separate. It really isn't. It should be an integral part of the task. It, and that's not to say that it has to be so enveloped into your task that you don't even know you're doing it, which is the case for many of these examples that are
Right.
here. Um, but it should be such a part of that activity that you just flow right into the end game of the activity, which is your assessment. It is the outcome, it's what you're looking for.
Right.
So yeah. Okay. Let's and again, I'll send you this. I won't even send you this. I have the longer one with all of that information included, so that's what I'll send.
Okay.
Quickly get my
Yeah, it's
screen.
at the top of the hour, but I think if people can hang around another 5 minutes or so, we'll be able to kind of get through it. Do you think, Marie?
Yeah, I'm almost
You
done.
think?
I'm almost done.
Okay.
In fact, this is the last thing that we were going to look at. So let's look back at your worksheet and fill out, if you can fill out the diagnostic and the formative assessment columns there, or if you've been doing that as you're going along. Um, and these are the questions that I wanted you to just consider. And if anyone has a comment, that would be great. So, do you use all three types of assessment that we've looked at today? Are all the skills and abilities measured, your students' skills and abilities measured according to what you've sort of put down in your assessment worksheet? Do you have anything missing? Um, and what assessments or tests might you need to add to enhance your teaching? So these are questions for you to both go away with now and take your assessment worksheet and sort of fill it out and be thinking about, do you have a good balance of these three types of assessment? Um, and if I need to find something else, I got to go look for something else. You can, there are a lot of places to look for assessment. You can also email me anytime, and I could try to point you in some directions. But at any rate, any comments on this last set of questions to consider, especially do you use all three types?
Okay, Gordon chimes in saying, I selectively incorporate self-assessment. It stimulates a circuit of independent drill and homework, and students really feel the empowerment. I also pair students, which also breeds confidence for both parties. Thanks, Gordon.
No. Great. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, why don't you maybe can you raise your virtual hand if you're in the process of submitting something, so we can kind of wait. Tell us to wait a second because you've got a contribution on the way. Okay. Oh, Darnell's got something on the way, so we'll wait for Darnell's answer. Well, while we're
Okay.
waiting for Darnell's answer, I think one of the things that Gordon said is really important, which is this idea of empowerment and being independent, right? So that students feeling like they have ownership and responsibility for their own assessment and being able to articulate what exactly it is that they need, right? All of us who've had ESL teaching experience know how difficult it is sometimes, right? When you that first week of class, when you ask your students, well, what is it that um, what is it you want, and they say, well, I need English, right? And so then as they become better able to talk what aspects of English they need, what areas of their life they need English for, it becomes much easier to develop lesson plans, right? And so part of that is the students themselves being able to speak to exactly what they want.
And it makes everything that they're doing so much more meaningful, not just the assessment part, but the activity part, the learning part. They're completely invested. They're driving a lot of the process, and it just, I mean, think of yourself in that situation. Wouldn't you love to be informing on how you are learning and how you want to see yourself assessed? It's just it's very powerful. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, I can show
Okay.
you one just little thing
Okay.
here, in case anybody is still writing, and then
Oops,
also,
hang on. When Darnell's answer came in, Darnell said that they use pre-formative and post-assessments, and they also use peer assessments, and advanced learners help others who need assistance. All right, thanks for sharing that,
great,
Darnell.
great.
Okay.
Yeah, you really do need you need a variety of assessments to be able to really get a good sense. Okay, I just wanted to show you the resources sheet I'll send you just in our last minute. And it's small, but you're gonna get it. But the first part of it has a whole bunch of online articles that are focused basic on some of my favorite assessment articles. Um, and if you would like to get a great, here's the one on building a level playing field that I mentioned, just so you know where to find that. And this paper is awesome. It's very, very brief, but gives you a great overview. It is definitely a primer. So if you wanted to share that with colleagues or read it yourself or have it as a reference, it's great. The next little section is a bunch of really helpful websites. And Here's the Common Core State Standards. If you are not familiar with those, you can check them out. Here is the National Reporting System one, and the GED 21st Century, where you can get information on how they're building their new tests. And then here is the one for diagnostic assessments of reading. Okay, so I just wanted to, it's all on there. And then people often ask me for resources for assessing what are called soft skills, or rather the better term is non-cognitive skills. And so we didn't look at that today, but I've added these in here for you just for FYI. These are some pretty informative and good resources for how to look at, think about, and measure non-cognitive skills and soft skills. So that's what I'll be sending you.
Okay, great, great. So thanks, Marie. This is, I think, a really informative session. Again, with an hour or so, it's always a question of what you can accomplish and not trying to go too fast, but trying to get a taste of different things. So what we'll do is I'll get the PDF of the PowerPoint from Maria, and I'll send that out to everybody that's registered, and also the other resources that she has sent along. Then
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing to think about follow up is that, particularly for those of you that are here in New Jersey with me and associated with NJOL, is that if assessment is a particular interest of yours, it's possible for us to set up a kind of a teacher study group, so that there's teachers who are in communication with each other about the kinds of assessments that Marie was orienting you to today. Going to the website and checking some of those assessments out. So you can use the NJOL Gmail account, which is njolmail@gmail.com, and send us an email there saying, I'm really interested in assessment. Are there any other teachers out there that would really like to talk about assessment? We could use this webinar platform to hold an additional webinar like this. It's also possible that, if you're in different parts of the state, that we could try to use the webinar so that you could get online together and talk about assessment. We've got the platform. We already pay for the platform on a monthly basis, and we can only schedule so many of these kind of expert webinars, but we can also use it as a way to communicate with each other. So, if there's anything that you want from NJOL around assessment, please let me know. All right. And so I think we did a fine job, Marie, even though we didn't have that many microphones and things like that. And all of you, I think you did a great job too, typing in and communicating with us in a way that wasn't necessarily the kind of traditional webinar. So um, any
Yeah.
other last comments? Thank Gordon just passed along a nice compliment. He says, thanks, Marie. He had no idea that this would be so engaging and informative.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And I wanted to thank everyone for taking their time out to do this. I really, I enjoyed it as well. I appreciated everyone's comments, and I hope you found it useful, and I hope you find useful the few resources that I'll send along. And thanks, Eric. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me.
Okay, yep. And I think we can hang out for a few minutes as people, hang up if you have last minute questions. But I hope to see you all on future NGL webinars. We've got one coming up next week on changes in immigration law. We've got another one on changes in the GED. We've got one in December on algebra strategies, and then we have one in December on systemic professional development. How do you think at the organizational level, at the program level, how you can best organize professional development for tutors and tutees? So thanks, everybody. I hope everybody has power and is doing well and
Yeah.
is hanging in there through the various storms that keep buffeting us on the East Coast. I know there's a couple of you that had registered from New Mexico, so you weren't in the same weather system as we are on the East Coast, but I hope you're doing well out there too. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll hang out if there's any other last minute questions, but we'll see you some other time.
Thanks, everyone.